Alison Laird from Morae Global. Afternoon there, Alison.
Afternoon, Clive. Hello, everyone. How are we all?
Hello there. So, we're looking forward to getting your views, perhaps, on what you've heard from our previous guests. But for those of us who haven't met you, Alison, what do you do and what does Morae Global do?
So I guess after more than a decade in big law, innovation and operations roles, I've now sort of switched into a consulting role. So I'm the global head of change management and user adoption for Morae Global. And predominantly what I'm doing now is helping firms and in-house teams navigate the people side of change during their digital transformation journeys. And alongside that, with a passion in sort of innovation and legal tech for the last sort of decade as well, I'm a teaching fellow at the College of Law in Australia on innovation and legal topics.
Great. I mean, you mentioned there the people side alongside the tech, and that's been a theme that's very much come out so far this afternoon. What are your thoughts on the things you've heard so far, briefly?
Look, I think that there's a whole range of activities going on in legal at the moment. And, there is very much a new normal, and technology is absolutely going to be that driving force. And I think that there's a lot of things in there that we need to look at, both what Andrew and Paul we've already discussed in terms of, potentially three areas. I think a lot of any of the innovation and technology, it's going to be in one or all of the areas. It has to be user-centric. So the future is going to need to increasingly cater for the next gen workers, and they're going to be digital natives and they won't have experienced any other way of working. So we'll need to be able to further adapt how and where we work to compete in the war for talent and have tech solutions that support that. And really important to remember that work is something that we do, not somewhere that we go. And that's been reinforced, obviously, by COVID as well. I think the second area that's sort of linked to that is that technology is going to need to be focused on being more accessible and more visual in nature. So it needs to be much easier to digest information to cater for, the increasingly time and attention limited and poor people that we're all becoming. And also there'll be an increase in those self-service options. And as Andrew sort of mentioned, those sort of contract life cycle, the whole end-to-end life cycle of options in there. Mm-hmm. And I think the third is probably to connect all of that is better collaboration tools to help people create, build and deliver innovative solutions, particularly in that borderless hybrid working world that we now are in. So in terms of actual topic areas that maybe haven't yet been mentioned in there, but do focus on the people side as well as the ESG and the DEI, so environmental, social, corporate governance and diversity, equity and inclusion, and helping businesses integrate that into business culture, and how does technology work alongside the delivery of legal services to wrap all of that into it as well.
So it's great to hear that echo again, that it's the cultural side of this is almost more significant, it seems to me, than the specific technologies. So much is changing. Andrew mentioned earlier alternative legal service providers. A question that's come in from Vinayak Mishra is how effective have those alternative legal service providers been? And I suppose there's two ways of understanding this question. I'm not sure how Vinayak mentioned it, but I suppose there's the professional effectiveness of these ALSPs, but also I'm interested is how effective are these ALSPs in terms of shifting the culture, not just the actual function. Andrew, you brought up the topic of ALSPs. Do you want to answer that one?
I couldn't comment on how effective they are from a professional perspective, but I think from a culture perspective, I don't think they've had to shift the culture because they've come in and they've been established with a culture of digital sort of approach to things. Like we're very much focused of a case of trying to take a very old traditional law firm and change that sort of culture and ways of working, whereas they're coming in with effectively a tech-enabled solution from the beginning because that's how they keep their margins very, very low and I guess their unique selling point is that they're coming in as they're doing that, and the types of work that they're doing that, so that becomes quite appealing, I think, to a certain type of lawyer that wants to work in that way. So I guess from that perspective, very, very successful. And I think also I guess the impact that we have seen in that in our end as the market, when we're looking at sort of large amounts of highly repetitive work. So, for example, from a document review piece or what's relevant, the repapering around IBOR at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think our organisations have realised that we should probably partner with an organisation like that as opposed to try and replicate what they're doing, because they are better at it. So I think that's a really odd way of answering in terms of how they've influenced, but I think there's a recognition that at the big law end of the world is that and I'm talking about the Clifford Chance, is that we're not maybe best set up to do that kind of work, and maybe better to partner with an organisation that does that natively, because they'll do it better, faster, cheaper, and I think ultimately the client will benefit.
Paul, do you think the culture that these smaller startups bring into the established profession, is it nudging the larger companies to look at their culture and change things?
It's going really slowly, yes, but very, very slowly. There's still, and I'm probably going to get crucified for this, but I still think that there's a very crusty attitude to law firms. You still have got hierarchical culture going on in law firms. Not so much in-house, obviously, because it's a completely different structure, but it is changing. And I would say in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, it's changed more quickly. I can remember, I mean, I don't think anyone becomes a lawyer because they want to sit churning hours, reading vast numbers of documents and not doing anything else. People become lawyers because they want to help people, or they're interested in law itself. I did it because I thought it was cool and I want to do technology related stuff. So there we go. So I was horrified when I spent my first 2 years sitting in a room writing page numbers down on documents. I thought, how is this a good use of my degree? And I was also horrified the fact that you couldn't go and speak to the senior partner in the office where I work, because he would shout at you and check that you were in the office on a Friday evening and that you hadn't gone home. I ended up having to bring a file box, pretending there were files in it, so I put my coat and bag in it and pretend I was delivering files to the photocopier just so I could leave the office. That is changing. I think now junior lawyers won't stand for it. Clients won't stand for it. They don't want to know that essentially they're spending a lot of money on what is becoming some sort of very expensive sweatshop for lawyers. And I think that will accelerate as time goes on. We mentioned alternative legal service providers. They are feeding that too, because they are competition for some of this volume work. And it's a good thing. Lawyers are there to help people out, not to essentially make other lawyers miserable. That does kind of happen.
Chris, just briefly, if we can, does this mirror what you see in people perhaps at the start of their careers, this need for a culture shift?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say that I want to get Paul to come and speak to our students about ways of escaping from the office. But yeah, I think, I mean, I came to it from a very, I'm not a corporate lawyer, or I'm not in that world at all. I was in, I was sitting around on beanbags in a startup. That's how I came to legal technology. But I think there is when we first started, so I co-founded a company called Zeagle, and we were a document automation, or still are a document automation business that is, I suppose it is an alternative legal service provider in the sense that it doesn't require lawyers. So it was there to be, something that you could, a do-it-yourself product, but also it's also a product that you can use with lawyers and has been white labeled for law firms. So I think that the cultural change, and Paul mentioned, sort of slightly sort of crusty attitudes. And it's a few years ago when we started, so 2013, 14, we used to get a lot of sort of pushback or criticism because we weren't a law firm. It's even to the point where I remember talking to a lawyer who basically said, better that a business doesn't have any contracts than that it has contracts that haven't been drafted by a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So that was their sort of starting point. But I saw that change, that culture change, really, really quickly, and continues to. Well, I say really quickly, like Paul said, we're still a few years down the line, but it is changing a lot, and there's more people coming in, and there's more. You've got startups that are being incubated by by accelerators run by businesses like Clifford Chance.
That change is happening, and those partnerships that we hear of between the established companies and the smaller ones, that they just always sound like a valuable thing. Another
Definitely.
question, this one from Jacqueline Dempsey, a question for Andrew, but I'd also perhaps like to hear Alison's view on this one. Jacqueline asks, as we move towards a hybrid working environment, is this shifting technological advancement, I'll rephrase this. As we move towards a hybrid working environment, is this shifting technological advancements? And what are your views on what's required? So yeah, the hybrid working way that we're working now, is that itself a force in shifting the tech approach? We'll be quite brief on this one. So Andrew, to start with.
Yes and no. No, in the sense that the sort of a hybrid working environment, we switched to that very, very quickly, and it didn't, effectively the operations of the firm didn't necessarily change hugely overnight. Well, it did in some elements, more operationally. Yes, in the sense that I think people want to use collaboration tools that need to work in a digital way, because people aren't necessarily sat next to each other. So we're certainly starting to see an increase in the use of a collaboration tool where you share information on that rather than email information backwards and forwards, or just simply talk to people. So that's
okay.
So it's a bit of a yes and no on that one. I'm going to sit on the fence, I'm afraid.
So we moved.
Sorry, Jax.
We moved into hybrid working quite quickly, but that doesn't necessarily mean we did it in the best way, the optimum way, right?
Yeah.
Alison, what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, look, I agree. I think the world's becoming increasingly interconnected. That means we also have to be increasingly reliant on tech tools to deliver efficient client services. And that's in turn with the collaboration tools and all of those sorts of things as well, because we need to still be able to connect, and we need our junior staff, whether they're lawyers or professionals in the business, to still learn. And how does that happen when you're not sitting next to each other in the office and you're not picking that up by osmosis? Regardless, though, with any of the technology and the digital transformation journeys that we've got going on, it doesn't matter how great that legal tech is or how great the solution is. If people don't know how to use it, or they're not engaged, or they don't want to change, or they're resistant, then your return on investment is just not going to, be successful. So it's really important to make sure that we do remember that people are the crux of any legal services business, and they're the ones with the knowledge, and they're the ones that we have to bring on that journey with us.
Alison, we've heard a few things mentioned today about the pace of change and the fact that things are starting to move, but perhaps there's been a delay within the profession. What would you say is the biggest, boldest move that is happening now that was maybe delayed historically, even though it was inevitable that the legal profession had to do it? What's the biggest one change you think?
Oh, look, I think the biggest one, as much as some of the law firms and even some of the big financial institutions don't want to admit, is the cloud. Whether it's cloud-based document management systems or databases, we need to have those tools that support flexible and remote working. So the tools where you can access information anywhere, anytime, on any device, because that's what our clients are expecting and already using. So it's about those enhanced sort of functionality that you get with cloud-based services.
Sure. We're moving into our last few minutes now, just sort of by means of wrapping up. I wonder if I could just reflect that question around the rest of the room, and to just get any closing thoughts people have very briefly, if we could. Paul, what do you think is the one biggest shift, albeit delayed, that we're seeing?
In terms of legal innovation, I think it's making things user friendly. So we have had law tech isn't new. We've had we've had legal research tools for as long as I've been a lawyer, which is a long time now. But it's traditionally been quite difficult to use, not intuitive, almost sensing that it has to be complicated because it's for lawyers and they seem to like complexity. And the truth is, most lawyers, they just want to get something done as quickly as possible, despite the fact that their billable hours is money. But there's so many competing demands, both for in-house, private practice. It doesn't matter what sort of lawyer you are, or even if you're just a user of law, it's making things have the look and feel. I suppose in some ways, the sort of the technology that's really taken over in the last few years in terms of your use of social media platforms, things fail if they're not easy to use. And now, because there is more competition and there is more demand, they are becoming easy to use. So I think that's the main thing, and probably the most important thing if it's going to work.
Yeah, I love the fact you brought that up. Usability sits at the centre of so many conversations and changes. Chris, just briefly, as a way of wrapping up, what do you think is the one biggest shift that the profession has delayed but is now underway?
I probably take this from the point of view of some of my students. I think that what lawyers do is changing. So the job itself of being a lawyer, people who've done it for many decades, like Paul, will remember quill and parchment, but the job. I'm not just talking about the tools for the job. I mean the job itself. I mean that you might end up working in the innovation department of Andrew talked about the structure of Clifford Chance and having nothing to do with what we would have called being a lawyer. So I think and for me that's very exciting that being a lawyer is now no longer what it used to be. It can be a variety of stuff. So
that's a nice perspective. The profession itself is broadening in terms of the skills and opportunities. And Andrew, just to sum up, what would you say is the biggest shift we see now happening that should have happened perhaps a decade ago?
Yeah, I think I agree with what everyone said there. And if I may, Clive, just change the premise of the question slightly and just say what I think is about to happen and where we see the most potential to change. And that's the introduction of low-code citizen developers, where we can equip our lawyers, our staff, with a tool to enable them to build a legal an application that enables them to change the way that's working. That's something that we've dipped our toe in the water recently, and the results have been amazing. To be honest with you, have really blown us away in terms of what our lawyers can come up with, because effectively they're looking at a problem they're having. We're giving them the tools to enable to build a prototype that will solve that problem, and then seeing how that does that, and we can hand that over to our team, who can then productionize that and build that and actually solve many hours, which, to Paul's point, creates a commercial issue, but it's something that our lawyers really love doing. It helps them solve them. They feel much more engaged, and to be honest with you, makes my life significantly easier rather than trying to come up with ideas for things when it's my clients. It's actually my lawyers who would be coming up with the ideas and the solutions. So I think this is something that could be quite transformational for us as an organisation.
Do you know, I love the fact you finished on that, because you've actually just sort of reminded me what I've really appreciated about our time together this afternoon, is that these are ideas and people coming together from established legal profession, from technology, from organisational change. It's where these things meet that some of these conversations really get interesting. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. It's been a whistle-stop tour of this, but we have so appreciated it. To have this expertise gathered around one table has been brilliant. To Paul Haswell, to Andrew Beasley, to Chris Sykes and Alison Laird, I'm really, really grateful for your time. And I hope that some of the connections people have made today will kind of carry on going as this necessary conversation keeps going.